History remembers the headlines, the kings, the battles, the dates we are told to memorize. But the truth almost always hides in something smaller, one detail overlooked for centuries. Welcome to The Lost Detail. Tonight, how the world's first great age ended and the single message that survived the fire. A king sits in a burning city, pressing a reed into wet clay, writing the last words his kingdom will ever send. Outside, the harbor is on fire, and the ships that could have saved him are hundreds of miles away. He writes that the enemy has come, that his cities are burned, that they have done terrible things in his land. Then he writes one line that still chills historians 3,000 years later. The country, he says, is abandoned to itself. Within a few years, his city will be gone, and so will almost every great power on Earth. This is the story of how the world's first global civilization collapsed, almost all at once. And it begins with a detail almost everyone forgets. The fire that destroyed the city is the only reason we can read his letter at all. 3,200 years ago, the Bronze Age world was richer and more connected than anything that had come before. Egypt, the Hittites, Babylon, Assyria, and the Mycenaeans of Greece traded, married, and wrote to one another. Kings called each other brother and sent gold, copper, ivory, and grain across the sea. It was the closest the ancient world ever came to globalization. And then, in the span of a single generation, it ended. City after city burned, palaces emptied, and entire writing systems vanished from the earth. When the smoke cleared, the great kingdoms were gone, and a dark age swallowed the region for centuries. Historians have argued for over a century about what could possibly kill an entire connected world. To understand the fall, you first have to see how high they had climbed. By 1300 BC, the Eastern Mediterranean ran on a single miracle metal, bronze. Bronze made the swords, the armor, the tools, and the plows. The entire economy rested on it. But bronze is an alliance of two metals, common copper and the far rarer tin. And tin came from astonishingly far away, from mines thousands of miles from the cities that needed it. To make a single blade, a king might depend on a dozen kingdoms he had never seen. Trade routes stitched the whole world together into one fragile, brilliant web. Ships hugged the coasts loaded with copper ingots, perfume, ivory, and gold. One wreck found off the coast of Turkey carried 10 tons of copper and tin, a floating fortune. Palaces grew enormous, their storerooms overflowing, their scribes tracking every jar of oil. The Mycenaeans built fortresses so massive that later Greeks believed giants had stacked the stones. In Egypt, the pharaohs ruled a kingdom that felt eternal, carved in stone to last forever. Every kingdom assumed the system was permanent. It was not. Nowhere was the golden web more alive than a port city on the Syrian coast called Ugarit. Ugarit was a clearinghouse of the ancient world, where languages, goods, and gods all met. Its scribes wrote in many languages and helped invent one of the world's first alphabets. The city's archives held thousands of clay tablets, letters, contracts, and the private mail of kings. And in its final years, those letters grow darker. One letter begs a neighboring king for grain. "There is famine in my house. We shall all die of hunger." Another reports enemy ships seen off the coast and asks desperately what to do. The last king of Ugarit was a young ruler named Amurapi, and at the worst possible moment, his army and his navy were both gone. His soldiers were stationed far north in Hittite lands, his ships patrolling a distant coast. His overlord, the Hittite king, sent not help but demands. Send grain, send ships. Ugarit, one of the richest cities on Earth, was suddenly defenseless. Then the enemy arrived. We have the king's reply, written as the attack closed in. The enemy's ships came. They set fire to my cities and did evil things in my land. All my troops are away. All my ships are away. The country is abandoned to itself. Soon after, Ugarit burned so completely that it was never rebuilt. But the fire did something the king never intended. It baked his clay letters rock hard and saved them for 3,000 years. So who were the attackers? The enemy whose ships set the coast on fire? For that, we have to leave the ashes of Ugarit and sail south to Egypt. On the walls of a temple called Medinet Habu, a pharaoh carved his greatest victory. Ramses III recorded a vast invasion by a coalition he called, simply, the Sea Peoples. His inscriptions describe a wave of peoples on the move, sweeping away everything in their path. No land could stand before them, the text says. Not the Hittites, not Cyprus, not the cities of the coast. And here is the strangest detail carved into the stone. These were not just warriors in ships. They came with their wives, their children, and carts piled with everything they owned. This was not only a raid, it was a migration, an entire people fleeing toward Egypt. The reliefs even name the groups: the Peliset, the Shurdan, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, and more. One of them, the Peliset, would settle the coast and give their name to the land of the Philistines. Ramses claims he crushed them in a great battle at the mouths of the Nile. Egypt survived, barely, the only great power left standing. But where did these sea peoples actually come from? That question has haunted archaeology for 150 years. Their names hint at the Aegean, at Anatolia, at Sicily and Sardinia, but nothing is certain. Recent DNA from ancient graves shows a pulse of distant ancestry arriving, then fading within a few generations. People really did move across the sea, and then dissolved into the lands they conquered. For a long time, the Sea Peoples were blamed for the entire collapse. Case closed. Mysterious raiders came out of nowhere and burned the world down. But that explanation has a problem. Where did a whole population suddenly find the desperation to abandon their homelands and flee by the thousands? Something was driving them, and it was driving everyone else too. Deep in the mud of ancient lakes and coastlines, scientists found the silent killer. Pollen and chemistry locked in those layers record the climate year by year. And around 1200 BC, the rains failed, beginning a drought that lasted some 300 years. Harvests collapsed, granaries emptied, and famine spread from kingdom to kingdom. Remember Ugarit's letters begging for grain? They were written into the teeth of that drought. A hungry world is a world on the move, and a world on the move collides. Then the ground itself turned against them. Across the region, archaeologists find collapsed walls and crushed skeletons from a cluster of powerful earthquakes. Scholars call it an earthquake storm, a chain of quakes shaking an already breaking world. And the very thing that made these kingdoms rich now became their fatal weakness. Their economies were so interconnected that no kingdom could feed itself alone. When the trade web tore in one place, the tear ran everywhere at once. No tin meant no bronze. No bronze meant no weapons. No weapons meant no defense. Drought fed famine. Famine fed migration. Migration fed war. And war fed collapse. This is the turn that changed how we understand the whole catastrophe. There was never one villain, no single enemy you could name and defeat. It was a perfect storm. Drought, famine, earthquake, migration, and war, all striking a fragile system together. The Sea Peoples were not only the cause of the collapse, they were also its refugees. The hunters and the hunted were, in the end, the same desperate human tide. When it was over, the world had been hollowed out. The Hittite Empire simply ceased to exist. Their grand capital, Hattusa, tells the eeriest story of all. The Hittites did not die fighting for it. They emptied the royal archives, took their treasures, and walked away. By the time fire took Hattusa, the great city was already a hollow shell. The Mycenaean palaces of Greece burned and were never rebuilt. And then, something almost unimaginable happened. People forgot how to write. In Greece, literacy vanished so completely that the skill had to be reinvented centuries later. The memory of the lost age survived only as myth, golden heroes, a great war, a vanished world of kings. The Greeks who later told of the Trojan War were remembering a civilization they had already lost. But collapse is never only an ending. In the wreckage, smaller and nimbler peoples rose. Freed from the great palaces, the Phoenicians spread their alphabet across the sea, the ancestor of the letters you read now. Iron, cheaper and more common than bronze, replaced the metal whose shortage had helped doom the old world. Out of the Dark Age came new kingdoms, new peoples, and eventually, classical Greece itself. The collapse did not just destroy a world, it cleared the ground for ours. 3,000 years later, we are again a single, interconnected world that depends on distant lands for almost everything. The Bronze Age proved that a connected world can rise together and fall together. Which brings us back to a burning city and a king pressing his last words into clay. He thought he was sending a desperate cry for help. Instead, he was writing the obituary of an entire age, and the fire that killed his city is the only reason we can still read it. The country is abandoned to itself. Every collapse leaves one detail behind that explains the whole, if someone survives to find it. The question the Bronze Age leaves us is simple and uncomfortable. If it happened to the most connected world of its time, what makes us so sure it cannot happen to ours? The clay remembers what the kings forgot, and that was the detail they lost, waiting in the ash the whole time. Every story turns on a detail someone lost, and there is always another one. If you want to find the next one with me, subscribe to The Lost Detail. I'll see you in the next story.